Hello, authors and readers, and welcome to my weekly YouTube video. This is freelance fiction editor Miranda Darrow with one of my novel deep dives, where I invite a guest to chat with me about a recent novel that demonstrates a specific fiction writing skill or technique. We'll explore how the author did it and how they accomplished the skill or technique with an aim for authors to see how you can improve your own writing skills. Spoiler alert. All of my novel deep dives contain serious spoilers for the books that are being discussed. So if you have not yet read Culpability by Bruce Holsinger and want to read it without having it spoiled, pause this video, read the book, and then come back and watch it. I used to get annoyed with my book club friends when we would have a whole month to read a book and then half of them didn't finish and they didn't want us spoiling it. But this was the one and only meeting where we were going to talk about this book. No, we're going to talk about this book. We are going to dig it apart. And by the way, if you have a book club, I have a book club booster kit, which is the list of questions that my guest and I are going to go through. So if you would like to play along and invite me and my guest, Sue Dockstader, to your book club, feel free to download the book club booster kit and get the list of questions. That's down in the link below too. All right. So, my guest today is Sue Dockstader, who has worked in London and in Hong Kong as a lawyer, a writer, and an editor, and most recently in the US as a nonprofit consultant. She was inspired to transition to fiction writing after collaborating with her mother to publish a successful children's book series, The Adventures of Henry the Field Mouse. Sue's current book is about an underestimated woman and a misunderstood dog, and it's currently with beta readers. So you can find out more about Sue at her website, Sue Dockstader. So that's SueDockstader.com, and I will drop the link down below. Welcome, Sue. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. This is going to be fun.
Yes, it is. Sue also has a great travel story about a trip to California, which took an unwelcome detour on some soft sand. And that's available on her website, and we will drop that link too. And I'm happy that we're going to have two lawyers picking apart this book because
Not sure if that's a good thing
culpability,
or a bad thing.
we'll see, because this talks about it has concepts of legal liability, moral responsibility, and technical capabilities. And they're all coming to a head in Bruce Holsinger's Culpability. All right, let's kick it off. One of the fascinating things about culpability is how the technology itself doesn't feel futuristic. It feels like 5 minutes from now. How does Holsinger make advanced tech feel emotionally intimate rather than purely conceptual? And what craft choices keep the novel grounded in family dynamics and human consequences instead of just being a tech book?
Yeah, I mean I think it's great because he does very little explanation of the tech as we go along. It's just assumed that it's normal, and for a lot of it, the cell phones, the texting, the chatbots, it's all stuff that we're used to. We all yell at Alexa and have her do all kinds of stuff in our house. So it was very much just kind of woven into the story, which I think was, he did really, really well, that it didn't jump out at you as being weird. And I think also because everything is written from Noah's perspective, the dad in the story, we as the reader, we're kind of discovering stuff bit by bit as he does. And so there isn't a big tech dump of stuff. And there's nothing that ludicrous. The car isn't flying. It's all very it's all very believable.
Possible, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think there's definitely a lot in there to give you pause for thought. And wow, could this happen? Is this happening now? I mean, a lot of it I'm reading, I'm thinking, oh, maybe is that a thing? I didn't even know, and so definitely a very thought-provoking read.
Absolutely. I thought the opening of the novel with the family in the car and Charlie, the 17-year-old son, is sitting in the driver's seat monitoring the self-driving Sense-Trek high-tech vehicle. This reminded me of the pilot episode of the Amazon Prime series Upload. And Upload premiered in May of 2020, so 6 years ago, and it was promoted as sci-fi. And in the pilot episode of that, the main plot is that we meet our main character, and his girlfriend was paying to have his brain uploaded in a computer platform so he can still live in a virtual world. But
Hmm.
we find out that the reason he died is he was in a self-driving car that had two modes, and one of them was protect yourself, the people in the car, and the other was protect others. And so when his girlfriend had handed him the car, she had put it in protect self, just run over all those kids waiting at the bus stop. And Nathan, the main character, had programmed it to protect others. And so she was mad at him for
Hmm.
messing with that algorithm. And I just thought, huh, I wonder if this algorithm had a choice like that, like they did in that series Upload, a sci-fi series from only 6 years ago. Um,
Right.
so, and then this the concept that made it super sci-fi when they were doing Upload was this virtual existence that you could upload your brain and your consciousness to after you're dead. And so that seems still futuristic to us, but people have been making movies about that
Right.
concept for over a decade because there was Transcendent with Johnny Depp and Replicas with Keanu Reeves, both from like 10 years ago. And
Right.
so thankfully that's not happening yet, but we do have self-driving cars and the laws have not caught up with these technological advances.
Right.
So when
Right.
I was reading this, I have a 15-year-old son who has a driver's permit right now, and we are responsible adults sitting in the passenger seat, trying to make sure that he's staying in his lane and he's following the four-way stop rules and all those other things.
Hmm.
But I also
Hmm.
have a 19-year-old with a full license, and I'm not responsible at all. I could be in the back seat, writing a memo, whatever. Even if I was in the front seat, I wouldn't feel responsible because they're a fully licensed driver. And so I did look into some of this. Oh, and the other tech is there are drones everywhere in this book. So that's the other tech. It's like when they're searching for Monet's daughter when she's missing,
Hmm.
there's like a whole drone grid. There are drones that are off page that are in distant countries fighting wars. And they just kind of show up in little tidbits in the headlines, and then we find out more
Right.
about Lorelai's role with that whole program later. And then it ends with the very end with some 7-year-old child flying a drone around Noah in his yard. And they said he's in control of it for now. It's just,
Yeah.
yes. So it was kind of like the tech's all around us. You can't escape
Right.
us, one of us.
No, I was going to say, but I think it was all very believable because I think
Yes.
most of us have experienced, even if we haven't been in an autonomous taxi, which kind of scares me to death, the thought of that. But, my husband's car has like a self-parking thing, which
Oh, does it do the crab walk?
it still kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies when it reverses into our garage,
Yes.
and so the whole concept of having an autonomous car is not so sci-fi. It feels just around the corner.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And the other tech aspect that was kind of a main feature in this was the AI best friend of the middle child,
Right.
the older daughter, Alice. So
Yeah.
Alice is confiding in her friend Blair, and we find out pretty early on that Blair is AI. And her parents think she's talking to a girl that she'd met in the hospital after the crash when she was recovering from her concussion. But really, she had known Blair before, and she was talking to Blair while they were in the car. And that one is kind of terrifying too, because you don't know what these AI are suggesting to kids, and these parents had no clue she was even talking to it. So,
Right. And that gets quite interesting as the story
yes.
goes on as to what is revealed about Blair, which again, as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, do they record everything that you tell them,
Why
or
wouldn't they? Why
yeah,
wouldn't they?
yeah,
All right,
yeah.
our next question. This novel asks readers to confront an uncomfortable question. When technology participates in harm, who actually carries the blame? It's complicated by the fact that almost every character in that family contributed in some way to the accident. So, how does Holsinger distribute responsibility across all the members of the family and the AI without making the narrative feel morally muddy, or emotionally unsatisfying?
Yeah, he does a really good job of dripping out the information, the evidence, the the kind of facts that as the reader you have to piece together. And the more you read, the more each family member has some element of responsibility. And so I thought that it was very well done, that it's not obvious from the get-go, oh, there was a blown tire, some kind of mechanical failure, and that's why they veered across the road. Or there wasn't an obvious explanation for the crash right from the get-go. You had your suspicions, and then the more you find out from that first part where they're describing what everyone's doing, and then as the story goes on and you get a little bit more detail, the dad is on his laptop. They make a big deal of he's writing this complicated memo, and so he's very engrossed in his laptop. But it's not till later that they kind of make that connection. Oh, he's the responsible adult. Should he have been supervising? And then the mom is in the back writing in a notebook, again, not really taking any notice, but she's in the back seat, so maybe she shouldn't have any responsibility. But neither parent is watching the road, it
No,
seems, or watching the behavior of any of their children. She's in the
right.
back.
It's
She's in the
like,
back with the two other girls. She's not checking on what they're doing. Um,
exactly.
and then, both the girls, Izzy and Alice, are both on their phone doing something. And
Contributing to the crash, both of them.
right. And so, there's so much going on at the beginning there where you just don't really know who's responsible. And then you get the whole issue of the car. And what responsibility does the car have in all this process? And I think, but for most of us now, we wouldn't think of the relying on the car's autonomy. But obviously in this book, the autonomy is more established. And so there is much more relevance to whether or not the car would be responsible.
Yes. So to spoil it, because we're spoiling this, the car manufacturer is the only party that is held responsible for this. However, I'm going to go through my list of this family
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
their high crimes. Okay, so I like that it's morally messy. I think it would be boring if it was just clearly Charlie's fault. But Charlie, I think, is probably the most at fault. He was behind the wheel. He was texting. Someone yelled and he jerked the wheel, crashing into the Drummond's car, and that killed this older couple. I do think among the humans, it was mostly Charlie's fault because he was in the best position to prevent the accident. Anybody else, even his dad, would have had to leap across the car and grab the wheel,
Right,
which
right.
that does not usually end well. I mean, I have a student driver right now, and I don't have a driver's ed car with a brake on my side. No, I just have to like, hey, pay attention. Watch, we're crossing. I think the second most culpable person is clearly Alice, the middle sister who had yelled, Charlie, stop. And so in legal analysis, we'd say, but for Alice yelling and scaring and shocking Charlie, the crash likely would not have happened. In chapter one, it just kind of reads like someone in the car yelled, but we don't know who. So we have to
Right,
keep reading on.
right.
And we thought that was because the car was going to crash. But later, when Alice is talking to Blair, we find out that the car wasn't actually going to crash. She was just doing this to try to get Charlie in trouble for texting and driving. She'd seen that Charlie was texting and driving. She was
Mhm.
annoyed that nobody was paying attention. She was annoyed that Golden Boy Charlie was once again having no consequences. So she wanted to make sure he had some consequences by
Right,
by shocking him, and she did not intend for him to like jerk the wheel into the lane and kill the Drummonds, but she also never took accountability. Alice was jealous and miserable because she's sick of being the middle child. And I hear you, I was a middle child. But this is not the way, Alice. And the guilt is eating her up. But also, she never took accountability. Then we have Izzy, the daughter in the way back. She contributed directly to the crash by sending text messages to Charlie, who is driving the vehicle that she is in. This is like zero self-protection measures. Hey, you know you're in a car. You know your brother is driving. Let's send him a bunch of inane texts about nothing. And then the two of them are giggling and laughing, and they're both on their
Right.
phones, and none of the parents. And so, I mean, Lorelai is sitting in the back seat, watching in judgment, but she was closer to Izzy, who was in the very back, who was also doing this texting and giggling. She could have figured out they were texting each other, especially if that's something that they do. When I was in school, I rode the bus. I lived in the country, and one April 1st, we had an idiot kid on the bus who yelled "deer" on April 1st, and my bus driver slammed on the brakes because it is pretty not that uncommon for a deer to come jumping out onto the road. We're on the country in rural Wisconsin. And then she pulled over that bus and she chewed that kid out. She's like, "You could have killed every single one of us. What are
Right.
you doing?"
Right. Right.
So that's what needed to happen, but didn't happen in this situation when
Right.
when when um when Alice is yelling, "Charlie, stop!" when there's no reason to. She could have just said, "Hey, Dad, is Charlie texting?" Boom, same thing without the murder. Okay. Then let's look at the smart car. How smart of a car is this? That the driver's phone is not disabled and not reading the text out loud, rather than allowing you to get them on your. Come on
Right.
now. That seems like I have not the smartest car. I have a Jeep. And my Jeep, every time I get a text message, if I'm driving, it'll say, "Do you want me to read this text from so and so?"
Oh, that's true. I hadn't even thought about that, but
Yeah,
that's
I
true.
mean,
Yeah.
what
I
kind?
wonder.
Because it's not, my phone is in car mode, and it takes
Right.
pulling over in an act of Congress and trying to prove that somebody else is really the driver, because my car knows when I'm driving versus when my husband's driving, and then
Yeah.
because of the settings, because I'm a foot shorter than him, and it's just like my phone will play my audio and it will my
Yeah.
book, because I'm always listening to a book, and it will put up my map, and then it'll tell me if I get a message, do I want to hit a button and have it read it? And
Right.
usually, no, it's some awful like spam with a really long URL. And I'm like, no, just
So
ignore that.
maybe in this situation, because it was the son, he doesn't own the car. So he's only an occasional, I'm kind of,
I know.
justifying it. So
But
maybe that's why his phone wasn't connected to the system. So maybe only the
somebody's phone
parents.
needed to connect to the GPS, though. Who's got the map up there,
Yeah,
right?
maybe it was so, maybe it was the dad's phone
But isn't
because
the
it was his,
dad working? Isn't he
but
needing
he's
to,
on his computer, not on his phone. So
doesn't he need his
maybe,
hotspot? I don't know. And so,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
shouldn't the car, if it's super smart, know who's driving and disable their phone?
Well,
Okay,
a
but then,
flaw in
all
the
right,
in the in the process here, yes.
I know. And then we've got passenger seat Noah. He's getting a lot of heat for not supervising Charlie. But is Charlie a fully licensed driver? Because I believe, well, in the state of Minnesota, where I live, you have your license, you have your permit for a year when you're 15, and then at 16 you take the exam. And then at 16 you have the graduated driver's license where you can drive alone. You are limited in that you can only have one passenger with you,
Right,
one passenger who's a minor. And so my son who is now 19, so it doesn't matter, but when he was 18, he could drive with his brother in the car, but he couldn't take a whole group of people.
right. Yeah.
And so either he has a license and he didn't need a supervising parent, or he was at a graduated permit and
Mhm.
then he shouldn't have been driving with five people. It's one or the other.
Well, yeah, but there's yeah, you can't drive. I think if the parent is there, you can have other people in the car.
Well,
But it all
that's
depends,
different.
doesn't it? I mean, different
Yeah, I looked
states
up
vary,
Delaware
don't
law
they?
and it had said if you have a supervising adult, you can have one other person in the car. And they didn't say an unlimited number of siblings, and so it's like,
Oh, oh,
I
oh.
know. And so,
Hmm.
but
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
let's not pick holes in the legal
yeah, no,
stuff
we don't
because
need to pick holes in that. But I was just like, does he have a
yeah,
license or not? Because if he has a license that he's allowed to drive independently, then the fact that Noah's sitting in the passenger seat shouldn't
has
matter
no
because he
relevance.
could have
No.
been
right,
driving it by himself. And
right,
presumably he's
right.
17 with a license and he was driving because he turned 18 like 2 weeks later. You know, it's like, did you
Yeah.
have a license or not? So they made a big deal about that. But still, you could
Yes.
pay a little bit more attention. It's like the scene in The Incredibles when the mom is like the kids are going wild and Bob is like in his own and she's like, Bob, I need you to engage. And it's just like, hey, you're sitting there, you should engage. But then we have Lorelai and she's in the back seat. She's worked on this AI, and we don't know that till later. But
Right,
she had decided for the family that they were going to get the Sense Trek smart car because of the design, because of her beautiful algorithm.
right.
And if it was the car design's fault, then yes, let's point lots of fingers of Lorelei and the rest of that company. But I don't think it was a design flaw. I think that the jerking motion overrode the
That was
auto
what,
drive and
yeah,
that caused it. That's what it
yeah.
sounded like. And
That's
Charlie
what
wasn't
it's,
looking, and that caused
right,
the wreck. And so Lorelei also could have put down her very expensive Moleskine notebooks long enough to see that her daughters are both doing
right.
stuff and that the one is like giggling back and forth with Charlie. Because you can tell when two people are sending each other text messages. This is not that, especially when it's your own children, and you're like,
Right.
hey, are you texting up there? Are you texting with your brother? Knock it off. What the heck? We're all in this death trap here.
Right, but she was obviously convinced that her invention, her design, her algorithm was so
So
amazing,
vastly superior. Yes.
right, that that probably wasn't a concern to her because she would have assumed that the car was in perfect control of everything, and so there was no human element needed.
Well, then maybe Charlie should have sat in the back with Izzy and they should have just let the car drive itself.
Right.
They would have been better off, and so would the couple. So there's a lot of culpability, there's a lot of blame, there's not a whole lot of remorse. I mean, there's some. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But it was just
Right.
like, ooh. All right, here's our next question. What can writers learn from the book's treatment of small choices compounding into catastrophe? How does the story structure enforce the idea that disaster is rarely caused by just one mistake?
Yeah, so again, it's kind of going back to this little pieces being kind of dripped to you. So in the accident, it wasn't just one thing. It wasn't an obvious deer running out. It wasn't an obvious blown tire. It was potentially a distracted driver, a distracted parent. There was the kids texting. There was a whole number of things that added up to or caused the accident. And then the other car coming the other way. We're never really quite sure whether it swerved or not. I think we learned that it didn't actually cross the center line, but it was doing something. So there was something happening there. So there were just so many different things going on that you never quite you don't know for a long time who could possibly be completely responsible. Your interest is piqued with every little paragraph as to another element from another member of the family, and it shows well that this whole kind of catastrophe wasn't caused by one single thing,
But
that there
for the
was
nail, yes, the horse was
yeah there
lost.
was
Yes.
there was a number of different things coming in, so that building of tension with all the sort of multiple elements as the story builds, I thought was very effective because you were thinking, oh, Charlie, of course, he should have been in charge, and you think, oh, the dad's kind of responsible, and then oh, the daughter. So as the story goes on, the your own questions build as the kind of tension builds in the story, as the tension is building within the family. And a lot of that tension, you don't really know what is causing it. You can tell there's all this friction going on between the different family members, but it's not obvious from the beginning. So I think he did a really good job of having those little pieces gradually building the tension and the story as we go through it.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too, because the accident happens in chapter one. And then
Right.
we find out like right away in chapter 2, hey, that car was on fire. That couple died. And so you're like, hey, where do we go from here? We've just killed 2 people. But then we dig into the why and how and who. And so for the most of the people, for most people, they would think that, oh, wow, that huge climax. How did that happen so early? But
Mm.
really, it was the inciting incident. Because
Yes.
these folks are not really, overcome with grief for that couple. They're more concerned about what are the consequences going to be for them and their comfortable life and their son and his scholarship and his
Right.
lacrosse career.
Right.
And either of those parents could have said to Charlie, hey, pull over and let me drive. You need to watch the road and get off your phone. They probably would have been better off, if anybody else was in the seat. Another example of the one small choice leads to another is at the very end when Lorelai is being pressured to join the Department of Defense program for the LAWS, LAWS, the Lethal Automated Weapons System Combat Drones program, and that the algorithm from her self-driving car has been made into a weapon. And while she didn't intend it, she knew it was happening and she didn't stop it. And then the question that they leave is, okay, sure, I want to make driving safer. So that's a small choice. That's an easy choice. And it's just like, okay, I know that Daniel Monet, who is an investor in this company, is also using this um, work for hire algorithm and using it in these other uses that I'm not a fan of. And then it's like, well, at what point is it too late? Are you the frog in the pot and it's boiling or whatever? And so the question is whether she's going to try and do anything about it, whether she's going to try and be a whistleblower, whether she's going to try and shut down this program. And she's at least thinking about it, but she does have a pretty comfortable life there. So yeah, that's a tough one. But
Right.
again, that was like small choice, small choice, small choice, and then all of a sudden you're in the soup.
That, yeah, she didn't know where her technology was going.
While the same could be said for Oppenheimer until he knew. And so, all
Yeah.
right, was Holsinger able to maintain reader empathy even when the characters behave selfishly, defensively, or irrationally? And what are the writing craft tools that he uses?
So this is interesting because what I wasn't that crazy about any of the characters, to be honest. I think they were all flawed in some way or other. I wasn't like rooting for one person or another as I was reading through. Each of them was annoying or irritating, or which is good
Yeah.
in some way. But I think it was interesting that the book is written from one person's point of view. We really only get Noah's point of view on everything. So as the reader, we only get his take on what's going on. We're kind of exposed to what's happening with the rest of the family, but you're looking at things through his eyes. So he's very sympathetic to his children. And so you perhaps have more empathy for them than you might otherwise have. But he does seem kind of clueless as he's going along, as far as the real extent of his wife's job, what his kids are doing online. Um, he's trying to sort of keep the peace with his wife by, like, when Charlie goes off without his life jacket, he hides it so his wife doesn't get upset. So he seems a bit frightened of his wife in a way, in that he's so
And
I'm
that's
not
not new either, because they talk about the time that
at the
Charlie wanted to
beginning.
camp in the backyard. Oh no, she wouldn't let him camp out in their own very safe backyard. We have to keep it a secret. And it's just like, good Lord.
Yeah, so there was lots of tension between the different family members, but it was interesting in it you only really got it from one angle, but you still felt it. So I mean, I
So
think he
there
did
it
it.
was using the perspective. And so
Yeah.
I do think that Noah was written as the most sympathetic character, and it was largely because it was from his POV, but I also felt the most for Noah. because I too am a schlub lawyer who went to, ooh, the best law school in all of Wisconsin. And because the way his sister-in-law was like, oh, she worked
Right.
for the, SCOTUS, and it's just like, oh,
Yeah.
ugh, whatever. And here he is working for some firm doing like, major deal contracts, and it's just like, oh, well, you're just some, junior lawyer idiot boy, and it's just you'll never be smart enough to have a conversation with your wife. It's just like, ooh, okay. So I did feel for him there. But it
Yeah.
was largely because the rest of them were so awful. If I were Noah, I'd be filing for divorce when I saw how much Lorelai was focused on trying to use her big brain to blame him when she's in her notebook and she's diagramming and she's
Yeah.
like,
Oh, yes,
Noah's
yes,
fault.
yes. And
And
then
it's
his
just like,
name is
not my precious
emphasized.
boy, not the one who
Yeah.
actually drove into oncoming traffic, but let's
Right.
find a way to, you were the, because she's the one who says it, you were the responsible adult. And it's just
Yeah.
like, okay, I was working, you were working,
Right.
and yeah, and she's like, boom, where's the first bus? There goes Noah, right underneath it. Um, Noah
Yeah.
is clearly a bit player in this family, and you get the impression that Lorelai's family, the doctor brother and the lawyer sister and stuff, that they're all just waiting to recast him with a better model. He
They
provided.
certainly don't like him. Well, they're
They
not
don't like
very
him.
welcoming, are they? Not very friendly. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're in Noah's perspective for most of the book, and then he talks about the Drummonds, and so we know that he's thinking about what they would be doing if they hadn't died in the crash. So in chapter 17 on page 90, Noah goes through this moral algebra that they are less at financial risk for killing two old people than if they'd killed a young family, some kids, young professionals with lots of future. And this is real. This is how they calculate these
Sure.
things in the United
Yeah.
States in a torts lawsuit. And he would know that. He's looking like a lawyer, but he's at least acknowledging that the Drummond family had a loss. Their family lost them, and his family caused it. And then he keeps drawing parallels to this other older couple who are staying at the
Oh,
house
the
next to
people
them.
next door. Yeah.
Yes, and the sweet old couple who are walking together. He doesn't care enough to actually do anything, but we think that he's got some humanity in there. Um, but the other POV that we get a little bit, it's not direct POV, but we get Alice's perspective in her chat conversation with Blair.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
we do get some of her thought processes, and they're yuck. No, she's burdened by guilt over yelling to Charlie to stop, which heavily contributed to the crash. And then as we go on, we find out that her reasons were super petty. She was not trying to prevent a crash, she was just
Right.
trying to get Charlie in trouble.
Right.
She was reckless, she acted like a spoiled child. And then her AI companion. So what I thought was going to happen, I'm always looking for evil AI. I thought that Blair had encouraged her to do it, but really, no. Blair had tried to talk her out of it. That's a bad idea. Don't do it. Please don't. What happened? And so it's just
Mhm.
like, okay, because I thought baby Blair was the instigator saying, do it, shout something, and that'll get
Right.
their attention. And then you'll be the golden child and Charlie will be the goat, and it's just like, that wasn't it. And then Blair was also trying to get her to confess, to say, oh, hey,
Yes.
I yelled at because I wanted you to see that Charlie was texting, not because we were actually going to get in a crash.
Right. Yeah.
But
That
she
was,
never did.
well, I think because we find out that she wasn't actually warning them of a crash. She was just yelling to
Yeah,
be,
she was just yelling. She
she
was
was
just
just,
yelling to get him in trouble.
so
There
I,
was no impending crash.
yeah, so I
Yeah.
think she just was riddled with guilt about that. And even though Blair, the chatbot, kept nagging at her, have you told them yet? Have you told them yet?
I told
And,
them
and we,
something. I told them Charlie was texting. It's like, it's not really what you need to confess.
right, right.
You need to confess your role. Yeah. And so I think yeah, my
But we don't
empathy
get that information until quite late
very
on.
late, but we know that
We,
she's hiding something.
right, but we don't know what.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. Okay. A lot of the novel struggles, a lot of novels, not this one, struggle when explaining complex tech. because the exposition starts getting too nerdy, starts to sound like a TED Talk. One time my book club was reading Red Rising, which was not actually that techy, but my very nerdy book club got into a fight about whether or not it would work to mine hydrogen under the surface of Mars and the ways that they, because these yeah. And so there was not this much. And so how does Holsinger integrate AI and automated systems naturally into scenes and dialogue without and character interactions without bogging down the pacing?
Yeah, I think a lot there's references to all kinds of tech all the way through, from the car, the air conditioning system, the smart house stuff, and what have you. But most of it is very normal stuff. But anything that is more complicated, it's just hinted at. I think I don't care for a lot of those really complicated war books that go into all the details of the weaponry and the navigation system, and because I have no clue whether it's valid or not. I'm just that I just skip over all that stuff. So I'm glad that they didn't explain how you write an algorithm, how you set up a smart house, how the house Alexa, whatever it was called, person knew that the air conditioning was working or not. I was grateful that he didn't do that. But then he added in those excerpts from Lorelai's book,
Yes.
which kind of dropped in much more technical stuff, but in a very kind of compartmentalized way that just made you go, rather than her explaining in dialogue to her husband
Which would have come off
what's going on.
as you know, Bob dialogue.
Exactly,
Yes.
which would have been,
Info dump
preachy.
in dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the fact that that was, I thought, an interesting technique, because we already had the chatbot inserted as to give
Mhm.
us another kind of perspective. And so then getting all Lorelai's really pretty complex analysis of the moral implications of it all, I thought that was actually a pretty clever way of doing it, even though it was
I
a bit
did too. And
confusing
they
to
were
begin
all
with.
short. They were all a
Yeah,
page or less. And they were
yes,
all excerpts from Lorelei Shaw's book, Silicon Souls on the Culpability of Artificial Minds. And I was like,
right.
huh, I wonder if, it sounds like something that could be a real book. And
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's like, has she already written? I mean, I guess that was the book that she wrote at the end.
earlier. Oh, is
But
it? Okay. Yeah.
well, I'm thinking, because at the end she rather than taking the job with Monet, she writes a book about the ethics. And
I
so
thought she was doing both. She was doing it from the inside, but I don't know if it was
I
100% clear because we don't know
yeah,
Lorelai's thought process. We know that Noah encouraged her
right,
to take a different path, but the money was good too.
right.
Oh, we'd have to be peasants if we were surviving on just your law firm money. So,
Yes, yes. And so I think it was there was a lot of tech stuff in there, but it was interesting the way it was just treated as being very run of the mill. And then you got this real deep dive into the moral aspect of the AI, which definitely gave you pause for thought.
yes. Yeah, none of this tech surprised me or seemed like an info dump because this is pretty much in our timeline. My 19-year-old is obsessed with tech and computers, so we have frequent conversations about computers and robots and AI and tech in our house. But the only time I thought it was a little dense wasn't when they were talking about the tech. It's when they were trying to show off how incredibly brilliant Lorelai was, and some of that was a bit more pretentious than technical. She needs to use the yellow moleskin notebook right now, not the violet one. And so the discussions about the moral choices, it reminded me of the discussions about the trolley experiment that they
Right.
did with if you saw the TV series The Good Place with Kristen Bell and Ted Danson, but in this TV show The Good Place, there's a philosopher character. His name is Chidi, and he ended up in this place because he had a hard time making any decisions because he was just too busy constructing and debating thought experiments. And so he was like wrapped in
Right,
this
right,
like,
right.
oh, what's the most ethical choice? And I love that character in The Good Place. And Lorelai came off a little bit like Chidi to me,
Yeah,
morally superior, looking down her nose at everybody. But in the meantime, she had an NDA, and so she couldn't tell Noah what she was really doing, and she was withholding critical, like
right.
vital information about her own culpability while still blaming him. Like
Yes.
she's blaming Noah while she has her own culpability, and I thought
Yeah.
that's rich. But her thought experiments and stuff was probably the densest part of it, rather than the tech.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot um of her analysis in there.
Spinning, and it's just like she just has to sit with her books and write
Was
her
she,
things.
well,
And
wasn't she supposed to be kind of somewhat on the spectrum and having
I yeah,
some kind of
it wasn't stated,
challenges?
but she was coded as on the spectrum. Yeah.
And so
And then
he
she'd had
was he was
a
very
sensory issue before that she,
right. So
yeah.
he was very conscious. I mean, you did have sympathy for Noah because he obviously loved his wife and he was always trying to look out for her. And so he was consciously trying to avoid issues that might cause her to have some kind of
Yeah, like the
breakdown.
kids were being spiteful and they left food all over the kitchen, and then ants got in their house and flies and stuff. And Noah like ran around cleaning up after them because he wouldn't want Lorelai to see that mess because she would spiral,
Freak
and he
out,
had to.
yeah.
And it's just like, your kids could also clean up their own food.
Well, I think at that, but don't you think at that point in the story, they're all kind of on edge,
Oh yeah.
you
No,
know? And
this was
so
this
so
was
he
tension
was
party of five. Yeah.
yeah, so he was not
He was trying to make the peace. Yeah.
exactly. He was perhaps not on teach my kids a lesson mode. He was on, oh my God, I just don't want one more thing for us to all be worrying about. So
Yeah, and about the lack of tech, I too have abandoned books that have gotten too technical for stuff. And so one of them was nonfiction by Eric Stieg. It was The Dead Wake, which was about the sinking of the Lusitania. And they started talking about the specs of the boat. And I'm like, just get on with it. Start crashing already. And I had to turn off the audiobook because I listen to audiobooks and I drive to work a long way. It's almost 100 miles that I drive when I go into the office once a week. And I'm just like, I cannot listen to this. I'm gonna fall asleep. It's too
yes,
dense.
yeah,
I need something happening
right.
on the page. So I
Yeah,
was glad it wasn't that because oof, I
yeah.
didn't want something that was just like a tech lecture. All right.
No,
Yeah.
yeah.
Next question. The technology and culpability feels mundane in the way smartphones are mundane now, which honestly makes it scarier. How does the normalization of AI and automation increase the tension in this story?
To me, it was the fact that it could happen. All of it was just so possible. It wasn't spaceships flying around and
Problems that we may
people.
never face is yeah.
Yeah, it was very much stuff that most of us are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Kids, family dynamics, cars, phones. It was all very relatable. Um, and even the heat-seeking drones we've all seen heat-seeking stuff, maybe missiles, but we kind of understand what the concept is. We don't need anyone to explain it to us. So it didn't seem crazy futuristic. It did seem kind of mundane. Just oh, okay, it's a drone. Yeah, we know what a drone is, and using drones to find something that makes a lot of sense. Um, can't really have a sniffer dog swimming across the bay or whatever. But yeah, I thought the technology was very, very relatable.
Yes, and that was this could happen to me. This isn't some in a fantasy world long, long from now. So I need to use tech at work and AI in my day job, and I think it's annoying. I think, I'm hoping that it's a little bit of a fad thing where people are going to be like, okay, these are things that we can automate and these are things that we still need people, but who knows? But
Right.
I am paranoid enough that I do not have an Alexa or a Siri or any other listening device in my house. It's bad enough that my phone is spying on my web searches and sending me bizarre ads when I'm researching stuff. Um,
Right.
and if I ever get another ad for Tai Chi, walking yoga, whatever, in 7 days, no, I mean, this is the age gap. And I'm just like, stop sending me these things. And
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yeah.
And so, but I have a dumb house. This house was built in 1970s. There's a dial for the thermostat. Because I have a coworker who is just like, oh, our thermostat went crazy, and they have a smart house, and I'm like, somebody hacked you, somebody's messing with you,
Right.
and and I like scary stories about AI and smart houses. I loved William by Mason Coyle. I don't know if you've seen that one. It was about a scientist who was living in a smart house and he's working on a robot and they have a dinner party and then nobody can leave. And then there's
Mm.
another one, The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware, and that was a suspense novel featuring a smart house, and the main character was a nanny working there, and it's just like all of these things are reinforcing my decisions to have a dome house. I don't even have a Roomba here. It's like, yeah, I don't know.
Mm.
And so I thought for sure that when the house was when they couldn't get the air conditioner to work, I thought for sure that somebody had hacked into it. I thought it was Monet who
There
owned the
was going to be
house.
some other element to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
thought for sure it was Monet who was turning up the heat on them because he wanted to send a message to Lorelai. But no, it wasn't that. So I thought that was an opportunity. Yeah.
Right.
Um, yeah. And so I did think that all of this was things that absolutely could happen to
Yes.
pretty much anybody. I say
Yeah.
pretty much, but not everybody.
Right.
Okay, which leads to our next question. Do you think contemporary fiction is becoming technologically literate out of necessity? And can modern realism fully portray contemporary life without having AI, surveillance, social media, automation, and digital systems as part of the universe in the fictional contemporary world?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you were writing a story about my 90-year-old mother in her little village with her flip phone, you could ignore a lot of technology because she does. But I think if you're writing about a younger family, unless you make a point of saying they're out of cell range, you automatically think, why aren't they just calling someone? Why aren't they tracking where they are on their phone? There's just certain things that we've become so accustomed to that I think if you have a modern setting, you may not need the smartphone, the smart house, because okay, there are some people who choose not to have that. But don't know how you do your shopping list if you haven't got Alexa, but that's another matter. But a story without a phone, without a cell phone, would be I think you would have to kind of make a point of it, because
Yeah.
otherwise it would be jarring. Because I think nowadays you will get something like, oh damn, no service, and then they're stranded and they're isolated, because otherwise it's just an assumption that everyone's connected all the time. So I think it is, if you're writing contemporary fiction, you have to have some element of Googling. There's a question, let's Google it. Yeah, I think sometimes in some of these cop shows, they're able to track people and find out information incredibly quickly, which I'm not sure you can just go and immediately you come up with the answer. But with a bit of digging, they probably have more sophisticated equipment than I do. But I think the technology is just there. You can't avoid it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you on both points. One of them is that if you're writing a contemporary and there isn't cell service, there isn't tech around, there has to be a reason. And
Yeah.
so I've read a couple of these and I like them because I like low tech. I like things set in the woods. So one example is These Silent Woods by Kimmy Cunningham Grant, in which a dad is raising a daughter um, off the grid, off in the woods, but you know, uh, there is tech in the universe, but they're hiding. But it's from the perspective of the daughter, and she doesn't know why.
Mm.
And then another one, um, in the in a dark, dark wood by Ruth Ware, is about a hen party, like a pre-wedding bachelorette
Bachelorette
party.
party. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's taking place at like a remote cabin and there's no cell service. And then the murders start. And
Right,
there's a
right.
couple other ones like that. Like I'm just read The Last Vampire by Romina Garber, and that is set at a school where they don't have no tech, but there's no cell service. And so
Mm.
everything that the students at the high schoolers at the school can look at has to go through the school system, so they don't have freedom to search. Everything is,
Aha.
yeah. And so I don't think that was an accident either. Oh yeah, no, the Wi-Fi is coming, we're working on it. And then I read one that was contemporary, that was set on a train. It was, what was it called? It was a number, it was like 510 or 520 or something, to Montreal, and this train gets stuck out in the snow and then they lose all ability to
Right.
communicate too. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, yeah,
You
but that
have to
has to,
set it up.
you have to set it up. There has to be a
Yeah.
reason why
Right.
these people don't have the sum of all human knowledge just at their fingertips.
Yes,
But
yes.
I also think it's being normalized in society now. But I too have an 87-year-old dad who doesn't have a cell phone or a computer. He has a DirecTV satellite system that he first
Mm.
got in the 90s, right? And so he has to try and find people to help him set this up when something's not right.
Right.
And I recently worked on a book for a client that was set in a retirement community. And these were seniors who didn't really use tech. And some of
Yeah.
them had cell phones, but they used them to take pictures of things to make them bigger so they could read them, and to send pictures and to try to text with their grand.
Yeah.
But
That's
they were
cute.
leaving these phones behind and forgetting them. And,
Right. So
as you get,
you can make it kind of part of the story, but in a very different way.
yes,
When
yes, this
if you're
annoying
in
thing
that,
that if I want to talk to my kids and my
yeah,
grandkids, I have to get out this stupid little box. And
yeah.
so maybe if Granny Fic is a niche market, then that would be the tech
Right.
desert.
Right, right, right. Well, for those of us who are less tech savvy, that's kind of a thing to remember. Okay, only write about old people who don't know
Yes,
anything
right
about
about
tech.
right about our parents' generation, and how they get to.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't use Alexa. We write our grocery list on a piece of paper every time we go. What do we need? We walk around, we do an
Right.
inventory. It's
Well, the reason it works for us is that now I have a retired husband who's, eating me out of house and home more than he did when he was at work all day. Um, we run out of things, but he's eating them, not me. And so with Alexa, whoever opens the fridge door and notices something isn't there can just yell at Alexa and tell her. So it's an efficiency that works more than the when you get to the grocery store. It's more the compiling the list at home. Just saying.
all right. I'm not there yet. I still pay cash at most restaurants because I don't want them to know where I'm eating and how much I'm spending. Okay, but I'm from the Midwest, and we're always slower to adopt things here. We're just like, don't really
Okay.
trust those robots so much. Okay, how can stress, this is the next question, how can stress
Okay.
reshape communication between family members in this novel? What can the writers who are watching this learn from the dialogue during moments of blame, defensiveness, and grief?
Well, I thought this was kind of a tricky question because I think a lot of the time the stress everyone was under meant that they were not communicating. They
Mm,
really weren't sharing. There was a lot of internal stuff going on, but there wasn't that much communication going on between all the parties. As we've already discussed, the kids had issues that they weren't sharing with their parents. The wife had stuff going on that she wasn't sharing with her husband. And so when they were communicating, a lot of times they were kind of quite offensive to each other because they were accusing or defending or deflecting. And so I thought there was either no communication, or when there was some, it was pretty abrupt. Like when Noah is on the beach with Charlie, and Noah is drunk, and he's just really overwhelmed by that. He thinks his wife is having an affair. He's just in, then obviously that on top of the whole worry of the car crash, and then the detective is coming in the morning to interview the son, and so he's like, come on, you've got to come home, or whatever he's saying, and the son is refusing, and then he kind of blurts out the whole accusation of the texting, and so the communication gets very acrimonious.
Yes. Yeah, no, I thought that was an interesting scene at the beach, and the argument they had. And then the next day when they were searching for Charlie and Monet's daughter, you know, Noah could have said, I told you he needed to come home with us, and you told me no, but he didn't. He didn't throw that up there because, she liked to, you were the person who was in the passenger seat. And right
Right.
now, it's just like, you were the person who told me to back off and let him stay out, drunk, high at midnight,
Mm.
on a beach. And here we are. And
Yeah.
so he held back a lot more, and everybody else in that family, it was knives out all the time. That sister-in-law Julia telling
Right.
Noah at his wedding that, this compliment that's really a bash. It's just like, oh, you are so much confidence to marry somebody so much smarter than you. It's just like, well, that's pretty wild as a
Right.
wedding conversation. Now, the
Right.
part of the book that I flagged where the conversations and the blame really got cooking was in chapter 23. We get Alice's fake confession where she wanted both the parents there, and she waited until they were all there, and then she was like, Charlie was texting, but she doesn't say anything about, and I yelled because I wanted to get him in trouble,
Right.
and
Right.
we weren't actually going to crash. And then that ends with, okay, and so in that section, I'm glad you did this. You did the right thing by telling us. I didn't want to tell on Charlie. He already hates me. He doesn't hate you. And now he'll hate me even more because I told you. And it's like, and then she says, it's my fault those people died, which it's more her fault than they know because she never told them that she
Right.
yelled it for
Right.
no
Right.
reason. And then the dad says, Alice, no, 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 the accident was not your fault. Charlie was the one at the wheel. I was sitting next to him. It was my responsibility. And it's like, it wasn't your fault, I say again. And then Lorelai says, absolutely not, darling. It wasn't your fault. And then Alice, they end that chapter by saying, whose fault was it then?
Yeah.
And then we get the Blair saying, "Hey, did you have the talk? Hey, hey, don't leave me hanging." And then the next chapter in 24, once again, Lorelai's going, Dorothy Barrels, this was all your fault. You were supposed to be, babysitting him, despite the fact that this was a self-driving car. And
Right.
she never says that I programmed, that I chose.
No, no, no. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
She's just
That's,
she's laying it on him. It's just like, you killed those two people, you ruined our son's things. And then Noah finally got a little backbone, and he came back with his 3-point rebuttal. Do you remember this? This is in chapter 24, I think we are. First, I did not see him texting. I just didn't. I was composing a memo. And so and then, second, if you were so worried that I was too timid to speak up to Charlie, why didn't you insist on sitting in the front? Because you're the one who says I never rat him out because we don't want to annoy you. If you're so morally superior that you know this, and you know this is a failing of mine, why didn't you do it? And then the third was the minivan was autonomous driving. That's why we bought it. You insisted that we
Right.
needed this car with this system because you've done all this research and you want the safest possible version. And the whole point is that it allows you to keep your hands off the wheel. And Charlie knew that. And so us getting this car and telling everybody this is then he's not going to think that he has to do anything either. And so he let down his guard that he wouldn't have done if he was driving, a Ford Escort from the 80s.
Right.
you know,
Right. Right.
because and so I did like that 3 point rebuttal because she was really stabbing into him again,
Mhm.
right after right after Alice has said who fault was it? It's totally yours. And she's like, here's three things that make it maybe some of yours too. And he didn't
Right.
even know her role in designing that.
Right.
So,
Or Alice's real role.
right,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Charlie
Yeah.
hadn't come clean about texting. Nobody is like just
Right.
all right. Okay, next question. What character undergoes the most significant shift in how they understand responsibility, and how does the novel dramatize that internal change rather than just stating it and telling the readers about it?
I think it has to be Noah. It has to be the dad that undergoes the biggest change. Lorelai doesn't seem to change at all. She just is the same annoying person the whole way through until she has a sudden kind of moral thing at the end. But he originally took the blame, I think partly because he thought he was legally liable, and also partly because he wanted to protect his son, who had this glorious future ahead of him, and he felt responsible to protect his son. Um, yeah, doesn't want to ruin his college chances and what have you. And he gets that little hint that from a legal standpoint, he may personally be liable, the dad. So I think
Yeah,
he starts off very much accepting that he has some liability in this. But then, when he hears about the car's records, that the car is going to be analyzed, that's just kind of dropped in there. You're not really quite sure what that means, but you're thinking, oh, well, is that what what is that going to reveal when they do that? So I mean, I think that kind of gets him thinking, oh, there's some other, the car has some
that
responsibility
detective.
here.
Yes.
Yeah. And then obviously then he hears about Alice, and then ultimately he hears about Izzy, and so there's like all these things chip away at that, and then ultimately he hears about Lorelai's involvement in the process. So I think he definitely his initial,
He was willing to fall on the sword
right,
at
but
first, but then
yeah,
as he realized how many swords he was falling on, he
right,
was
that it,
less willing to
yeah,
do that.
yeah, although it never, I mean, the whole point of the book is it never really says clearly this person is liable, this person is not. It keeps it in
Oh
a sort of
yeah.
a confusion. So he was definitely confused, but I think he changed his commitment to that level of responsibility, I think, as the book went on, because I think the girls, they felt they were responsible the whole time. I don't think they really changed that much.
No, no,
Um,
because neither one of them really owned up to what they did.
No. And Charlie changed a little bit because at the beginning he said, okay, it's completely my fault. I was driving, I'm responsible. And then once he spoke to the lawyer and and kind of got a little bit of insight about the dad's responsibility, then he kind of pushed it back to his father. It's like, well, you were the responsible adult.
The
So
lawyer that his sister-in-law who hates him had recommended that
yeah,
they get for Charlie.
right.
What kind of idiot lawyer is Noah that doesn't then also retain an attorney for himself? Come on. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and then so that he definitely underwent a slight change of responsibility, but I think Noah was the biggest change.
yeah, that's interesting. I kind of thought that during the week of the vacation, that none of them made a big dramatic change, that Charlie did step it back a little bit after initially being, I will take this hit for my whole family. But it's afterwards when they're off back from the vacation that I saw some character growth in two of them, but it wasn't Noah. First, Lorelai gets her NDA amended so she can be honest with Noah about her role in writing this elegant algorithm and what it was actually being used for. And he encourages her to try to do the right thing and write a paper to expose.
Right,
Yeah. And so maybe if that is the paper that we're seeing here
right, yeah.
afterwards, then that shows that that happened. But I was like, oh, I'm not sure if she's actually going to do it or not, if she's going to
Mm,
be willing to bite the hand that feeds her. And then the other person that made an outward change after they returned was Charlie, and it wasn't a great thing that happened with Charlie. He's taken a year off from starting school. He's down in the dumps. He breaks up with the Monet girl, as he should be. He was responsible for the death of two people, because he was reckless.
right,
And then he was also involved in an incident in which Monet's daughter almost died.
right,
She survived, and he's lucky she did because she exonerated Charlie. Oh, those were my drugs, Dad. Back off. But not before Lorelai ripped Daniel Monet a new one, blaming
right,
him and his drug pushing, night sailing, irresponsible daughter for
right.
endangering her precious son. I mean, they're not my favorite characters, Charlie and Lorelai, but they seem to be making some dynamic change after the week in the pressure cooker. I love the heat in that cabin, just kind of turning up the heat on all of
Right,
them.
right, right.
In the last
Yeah.
scene, when they were talking about when Charlie was young and wanted to camp in the backyard when Lorelai was gone, because of course she would stop any attempts at fun. And Noah says, "You've lost so much," and Charlie asks, "Have I?" Um, because I think that he's finally getting it, that compared to the family that lost the
Right,
parents, he
right,
really
right,
hasn't lost that much.
right, right.
Um,
Yeah.
and then there's Alice. She doesn't accept anything. She deletes Blair, her best friend, AI, when
Yes,
she realized
yes.
that Blair could out her as being responsible. She
Yeah.
doesn't come clean. Her name doesn't appear in the whole epilogue. I thought that was very telling. I
Mm,
looked through the whole
mm,
epilogue looking for Alice's name, and they're talking about Izzy has got a new dog, and she's so happy that Charlie's going to be around for another
mm.
year, and Lorelai is doing whatever. Alice is nowhere. She's just completely disappeared. And so I think that this whole thing is a villain origin story with um Alice, who never deals with and resolves these issues. And that her failure to grow as a person is kind of like a bad sign. All right, what did you want to add, Sue?
Yeah, no, I don't know what that hand is. That's not me.
Okay, was it me?
I
Oh,
don't know.
all right, okay.
There we
Oh, it was me. I hit it. I'm just like, where's this hand coming from? It's just two of us. All right. Okay.
go.
All right. Next question.
Technology.
I know what's happening. You need to stop talking about the bad AI. Okay. So,
Right, right, right.
are you
Uh,
sure you want to do that? It's Hal. Okay. What role does privilege play in the novel's treatment of accountability? Who has the power to shape the narrative around the accident, and how does that affect reader perception?
so right at the kind of first section of the book where they immediately hire a lawyer, they immediately the dad is like telling the police to back off. They have their privilege enables them to have the kind of confidence to do that, the finances to hire a lawyer. So it does definitely show that if you have some kind of status and cash, you can protect your family more than if you don't have those in your favor. Yeah, and the fact that they were kind of educated parents, they were immediately looking at the legal implications and looking into how they could interpret what had gone on rather than just, oh, we killed someone, we're to blame. So the privilege, and then also, I think it motivates the parents. Noah certainly talks about it in protecting the potential future of the son, in that there's something to protect there. They want to keep their children safe and on the path that they've kind of chosen for them. And so their privilege is affecting the way they think about this whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, they're very connected. They're calling up the best of the best and bringing them in. And so I'm not naturally inclined to root for characters who are coming from the 1% in stories because that's not my experience. That's not. But the story did pull me in with the ethical dilemmas, the moral reckoning. Everything about it made me want to read it again and find out where they buried the clues about Alice's true role, which were in those text chats all along. I did love the character of Morrissey, who was the police
Mhm.
who officer who was investigating it. She was the only person that who doesn't want this privileged family to get away with killing this couple.
Right. She
She
kind of
drives,
calls them out. Yeah.
yes, she drives all the way out there, even when they've decided not to press charges, just to drop a guilt bomb on Noah before
Right.
telling him that they're not going to press charges because the AI's role was unclear. And
Right.
this was ironic because initially, when Morrissey told Noah that they were using DVF, digital vehicle forensics, to determine what caused the crash, Noah was mad. He was mad that this fancy car was going to be ratting them out to the cops, and we would have been better off with something off the grid. And then we find out about the DAC, the driver attentiveness camera that was embedded in the car to show if the driver was paying attention. I'm like, what's the point of that if it's supposed to be autonomous, that you could be in the back seat? I mean,
Right.
and so
Yeah. Well, isn't it semi-autonomous? So maybe it's
no, they were saying in part of it, when Lorelai was talking to Daniel Monet, I think they were talking about the fact that they made this settlement because they say in their advertisements that it frees you up to do other things. You don't have to drive.
okay, okay, okay.
And if
Yeah,
they're
right.
advertising it like that, because there are these crazy Waymo taxis that are
Right. Yep.
right. And so if that's what this is, then why would you need a supervising adult when you could have a
Right.
completely unsupervised,
Right.
entirely blank front seat? Um,
Right.
so the AI was first blamed, but then we find out it was really Alice yelling at Charlie, who jerks the wheel, and he overrode the self-driving mode. And so, but that it was when Morrissey, or else it was Charlie's lawyer, who said that their AI was a get out of jail free card
Right.
because the
Right.
role of the AI was unclear. That's some privilege. People who
Yes.
have just a
Yes.
regular
Yes.
car don't say, it wasn't me, it was the robot in the car.
Right. Right.
Who else
Yeah,
can
that was the
afford a
ultimate.
car that
Yeah.
runs over people and you're not responsible? And then the car
Yes.
manufacturer forces a settlement that holds the whole driver's family harmless, unable to be sued. And that was Lorelai's doing. And so that's why
Right.
Lorelai's like, oh, he doesn't need a lawyer. No, you don't need to. And it's just like, have a real conversation with your husband, Noah, about
Right.
why he doesn't need it, because we're negotiating
Right.
a settlement on behalf of Sens
Right.
Tech. And it's just like, that was NDA or not. At some point, you should come clean to your husband before you bring a lawyer in. Unless her
Right.
backup plan was blame Noah, which it pretty clearly was. And so, but
Yeah.
Lorelai knew that that was unnecessary because she knew that she was going to be protected by this car company because she worked for them. Because she,
Right. Right. Right.
yeah, it's just like, oh, there was so much privilege. They were, yeah. All right. What are the biggest writing craft lessons that authors can take away from this novel? Structure, moral complexity, layered causality, the handling of technology, emotional realism. What do you think is like the hallmark
Yeah.
writing craft?
There was a lot. I think for me as a writer, the thing that I found the most interesting was the structure of it and writing from really one person's point of view. So everything you learned was filtered through him. And then as the reader, you really uncovered things as he did. And so you didn't know things that different characters didn't know.
I
You really
didn't know
only
what Lorelai knew.
no, you only knew what he knew, and then so you only saw what he saw, you only understood what he understood, and that was limited. As the story went on, you realized there was a lot of stuff he didn't know about. So that was kind of a clever technique, I think, to build the tension and keep you kind of turning, because you were really discovering it as he did. But then, including the chatbot, it kind of added another, okay, well, because I think to begin with, you do think it's a friend, because you don't necessarily realize
Right. You don't know
initially,
it's a chatbot
and
until,
then you think, hang on a minute, this is not a person. And that gave you an insight to that extra secret that she was carrying that you wouldn't otherwise have been aware of. So, I mean, that was a clever way to kind of weave that in without stating it obviously. And then adding the extracts from the book, because the overall book is dealing with, on a superficial level, family drama, family interactions, family squabbles, marital relations, kind of a superficial thing. But then with all the AI stuff in there, it's got some really deep moral questions, which could have been pretty stodgy if they'd gone in, if Noah had thought, well, I wonder about blah, blah, if he'd really analyzed it all on the page. And so having those sections from Lorelai's book, I thought was an interesting technique to just kind of bring in that. So the reader was like, oh, okay, all right, well, that's interesting. Let me think about that. So that they were building sort of in the background the moral questions before they really kind of came up in the story. So I thought it was almost like a dual timeline, in that you had the her moral worldview stuff coming in as the day-to-day family squabbles were kind of going along
oh
on the
yeah, they were
page.
strategically placed. That was
Yeah.
not just a chronological excerpt from this book.
And,
This
and
was
I
like,
think it,
yeah.
and I think there was also, you've got that drip of information, the different elements of delivery. You've got the standard book format, you've got the chatbot, and then you've got the extracts. And then, he just did a great way of really making everyone seem guilty.
Yes.
You just right from the beginning, you were just like, okay, yeah. So there was some interesting technique in there, I think, in the way he put it together.
Yeah, I thought that the highlight was probably its moral complexity, that was kind of the engine that drove the story was, you know, assigning a portion of the culpability and the responsibility to like every single person in that car, and
Right.
how much is it, and how much can we say it was the tech, or was it really the tech? Because if we'd left the tech alone, there probably wouldn't have been a crash. And
Mm.
so and just questioning, are any of these good people? I think
Right. Yeah.
Morrissey was the like social frame of how the rest of the world was viewing this event, and there to say that people driving Hondas deserve to live too. And so, yes.
Yeah.
All right. What makes a discussion novel work? Culpability practically begs readers to debate who's responsible, but how can writers intentionally build stories that generate conversation without being preachy?
Right. Well, I think, as you said, there was lots of moral questions that were just kind of thrown in there, which will always provoke discussion. But I think there was just a lot of threads set up. And I think depending on the reader's perspective, you might pick up on different threads. If you have a teenage kid, you can totally relate to the teenage driver. And so if you have, a smart spouse, you would immediately connect with that part. So I thought there were just many very relatable aspects. The tech stuff, we're all exposed to it, whether we like it or not, whether we choose to use it or not. And then, so there's that, I think, leads to a lot of discussion as to what people are comfortable with, what people understand, what people don't want to bring into their lives. And then I thought there was some interesting thing about the kind of privilege element as to how much as a parent you live vicariously through your children. And I think as a discussion element, we've all, if you've got kids, you kind of relate to that as to how you would really do anything to protect them. But you also rather like the fact that they got into a great college, and so you want to protect. So I thought there was a lot in there to
That the characters were relatable. Yeah.
yeah, very relatable, but and very kind of real life dilemmas that they were all facing. Which I think really, and then all the tech stuff just kind of compounded it all.
Yeah, I think that the author Holsinger did a good job of strategically placing good story questions throughout the novel. So, and once we start to get some information about a story question, then like it causes another question. It's just like, oh, well, what is the secret that Alice is keeping that the chat box
Right.
and so the question here isn't who done it like in a mystery because we know that Charlie was at the wheel, we know where everybody else was, but it was kind of more like how did it happen, who was contributing, and it's comparative responsibility rather than let's find the one murderer for our attention.
Right. Right.
And so if authors want to write books that book clubs devour, um think about your manuscript from a reader's perspective and what is the question that you want the readers asking at the end of this chapter, and then how do
Mm.
we answer that, and then how do we introduce new story questions to keep them curious, to keep them digging in so that they keep going. And so the example that I give for story questions is the TV series Lost, which kept asking great story questions, but it did a terrible job of wrapping them up and making it into a cohesive ending. So it's just like, why is there a polar bear? What's in the hatch? Where have these people come from? All of these things were great story questions and they were great hooks and would keep us coming back. But there was some really bizarro answers and unsatisfying. And so then you need to like answer them, at least address them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you have beta readers, ask your beta readers to say, hey, what were you thinking? What was the question that you most wanted answered? Because a lot of times when I'm working with authors, especially on first pages and first chapters or first 50 pages, is they have not enough information that readers are asking the wrong story question because you're either
Mm.
introducing like too many characters and we can't tell who's important. It's like, hey, pare that down. Don't use as many names. Keep the focus on the main characters and them until we get to really know them. And then you can introduce more people because we're being really coy about where and when this is taking place. And then people are distracted and they're looking for cute clues. It's like, is this historical? Is this futuristic? We don't know. Is this steampunk? We don't know. Just tell
Mm.
people, unless that's a central mystery, you know, people think that they need to like just give away 10% and then spread it out, but really you should give away 90% because then they really want to know that 10. If they only have 90, if they only have 10%, they're going to be lost and they're not going to
Mm.
be asking the right story questions. And so part of it is like making sure that the readers are grounded in what's going on so that they're asking the kinds of questions that's going to keep them curious and reading and then possibly debating it with somebody
Right.
else.
Right. Which I think this did. I mean, because
Yeah.
it was also relatable,
Yes,
um,
absolutely.
and there were so many little threads. Yeah.
All right, last question. 20 years ago, this book would have been marketed as science fiction. What current sci-fi themes and elements and tropes do you think will become part of the ordinary contemporary fiction coming soon to us?
Yeah. That is interesting. So I was thinking about this. I've made a list. I was thinking, okay, space travel, because,
Yep.
we go Star Wars and what have you, but it is becoming more and more likely that commonplace space travel will be more of a normal thing. I think having robots in the house beyond a vacuum cleaner and a lawnmower, I think that's going to become more of a normal thing. Obviously, autonomous vehicles, we're already having to deal with that in some way. I think that AI human relationships, whether it's friendship, romance, therapists, I think that's going to be more of a topic that people deal with because it's definitely happening more often. Um, what about something like gene editing? Because that's,
Yeah.
there's some of these
Designer
things that,
babies. Yeah.
right, we've had like sci-fi situations where they've created a master race and that just seemed
Terrible.
ludicrous. But
Yes.
now it's like, oh, we could replicate ourselves, we could eliminate certain diseases, that is becoming a lot more possible. Um, Tracking of people and things. I mean, we're tracked by our phones, maybe, having chips in
Ugh,
ourselves,
no chips. No thanks.
I mean, we already put chips in our pets. We're tracking our pets, so it's only another step to be tracking in people. Um,
There are
and
people who are chipping their children too.
Oh God,
Yep.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think the kind of unknown algorithms controlling stuff, which we kind of touched on here, but
Yeah.
um, uh, various situations being controlled by this other dimension that we're not familiar with. I think that's going to become a lot more normal. And then kind of mixing real life with augmented reality, having glasses that takes one person to one place and somebody else is going somewhere, someone else is not aware of that. I think a lot of this technology which is being developed is is will be incorporated in fiction.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. I mean, when Ready Player One came out 10, 15 years ago, that was sci-fi. But the virtual reality that they created with Oasis and that book and then movie series and stuff, that's not that far off.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with almost all of yours. And one of them that I thought, you know, generational spaceships where people board a ship and they either enter a really deep sleep and there's some people who are awake throughout it, or everybody's awake but they just know that the people who board are not the people who are going to land because they're going so far away that you're going to have like
Right.
2 or 3 generations that are
Yeah,
born and die on this ship during this journey and stuff.
that's weird.
And I've read some books with that and I'm just like, wow, could that happen? That could happen.
Yeah,
But I probably will only live to see the beginning part of it. Uh,
yeah.
Maybe we'll get actual smart houses that clean the floors and do the laundry and cook the meals rather than having
I'd sign up
AI.
for
Yeah,
that.
rather than having AI that writes crappy books while I do all that.
Right.
Let's get Rosie the robot from the Jetsons.
Exactly.
That's what
Definitely.
people want.
Definitely.
I might break my, no robots in the house rule if one could actually, do laundry and
Yeah.
clean the floors, clean those toilets.
Fold. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So why aren't they developing that? No, let's make them write books. Ugh, nobody needs that. Nobody wants that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for joining me, Sue. All the viewers, please check out Sue's website and click her link to go see a sample of her writing and check her out. And then, just as a reminder, next week I will have another video on writing, editing, and the writing life. And so, until then, happy writing. This is Miranda Darrow, wishing you all a good week, and thank you for joining us for this novel deep dive.
Bye, everybody.
Be sure to like and subscribe. This is freelance fiction editor Miranda Darrow wishing you happy writing.